So it was the end of my first year university, right? And if you've been to Brunel University before, there is a section of the university halls which is dedicated to freshers. And I was in the final year of my final week of my first year, and I was seeing this guy, same age as me, going around attaching leaflets in the reception of university halls. And the leaflets was advertising his company, furniture removal for university students by university students. And I had two thoughts that came in my mind. The first thought was, that's a great idea. I didn't even know what a side hustle was at the moment, but I thought, what a great idea, especially for all these international students looking to move their furniture in storage areas. But the second thought I had was, I'm starting to be an engineer. I couldn't possibly do that. I should get experience towards my engineering job.
I have two questions. The first one is, why do you believe in students moving your stuff without them breaking? Secondly, why did you think I can't even possibly do that? That's like, why?
So I think there's two elements to let's call it like my way of thinking. The first one is related to the concept of a side hustle or business, and the second was related to the concept of holding a job and making a career. Starting off with the first element, when I was about 13 years old, my sister was working, was starting to work her first few jobs. That meant that she had a couple of them. One of them was babysitting for some Italian neighbors whilst we were living in Kingston. And the second one was that something that she did on the weekend, which was working for a local Italian restaurant. Now, you see the trend here. There's a lot of dealing with Italians. And I remember I was a little bit jealous of it at the time. I liked the concept of money. And, who doesn't? This thing that you can have to spend and buy things that you want. And I remember even asking my parents, can I get a job? Can I do that? Can I make some money? To which my mother specifically replied to me that I couldn't. So my job was to go to school, get educated, and see it through. And the principle here started to become quite clear. Study hard, do it for yourself, and at some point in the future, it's going to pay off. And paying off basically translated to getting a job. But I reckon there was also an element of her thinking that I wasn't switched on enough to cope with the real world. And I think this possibly played a factor in my subliminal mind, constantly reminding me that I wasn't really good enough. Now, I mentioned there was two elements of that. And the second element was about the concept of a job. So my family's experience with entrepreneurship isn't very good, and it's not a positive one. So much so that my mom always say this thing. I think it's an Italian say, but it translates to, we're so lucky that if we were to open up a hat shop, people will start being born without a head.
You mean unlucky?
Well, it's a sarcastic, we've got that kind of luck, but there's a strong emphasis on luck here, not so much on the actions, and this stems from my dad's business experience, and he had a renovation and PVC window installation company. So PVC windows are those like plastic windows that we see in every house nowadays. As a matter of fact, I got a little bit of a funny story. I'm just going to take a little tangent. The company was called Verbal Design, and just to give you give you some context, when I was younger, I think I was in high school. Our math teacher gave us like this random assignment of finding out where our name came from. And I had like all these beautiful and fantastic expectations around where my name came from. Maybe it means something important. Maybe I'm named after someone famous and something to be proud of. Some really wonderful expectation. And I asked my mom. I was like, "Mom, why am I called Valerio?" And to which she replies that when Dad was younger, there was a company. The company that he had set up was called Verbal Design, which is a combination of the first three letters of my sister's name and the first three letters of my name. Now, because the company was established before I was born, that limited the options of names for me to the suffix val.
What?
And of course, hang on. And of course, this limited all the options to either Valerio, which is my name, or Valentino.
That was it. I love hearing stories of just making up. Like, actually, I had some butter the other day and was like, buttercup, flour. I don't know, butter.
Buttercup, yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, moving back to the main part of the story. So I mentioned that my dad had this company, and it was doing quite well for a period of time. But because of some cash flow issues and a number of problems with vendors not paying, or sorry, clients not paying, etc., the company ended up in administration. And because of this experience and the hardship that came from it, entrepreneurship kind of became a taboo in my family. And I experienced and remember the hardship as a child, and remember even creating like small clubs with my friends, and creating small structures within the club to to identify who the boss was in the club, etc. And as you can see, even from a child, I was really into this structure and organizations. Yeah. Um, but I remember that this is an 8-year-old building up this little social club for his friends, and I remember that at one point we wanted to switch over from a club that looked after animals to a club that looked after nature or something like stupid like that.
Mm.
Um, but I remember using the word solvency. So as an 8-year-old, I was already using terms which I had picked up from conversations that I clearly overheard from my parents, and it kind of goes to show that the effect the failure this company had was quite profound on me. And so this is kind of like the perfect start of employee 101.
Mm.
Entrepreneurship is too risky, there is too much trouble, um, I'm not good enough, and instead I should go for the safe options, which is study hard, work hard, retire, and eventually die.
This is like the unfair disadvantage.
The unfair disadvantage.
Hello, 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 and welcome to a new episode of the Needle Movers podcast, a podcast that gives you the lessons, books, and concepts we wish we'd known earlier on in our lives. When I say we, I'm referring to myself, Mark Jasons, and my co-host, Valerio Tomasa.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to this new episode.
So, this episode is part of our deep dive series where we will look into certain topics and explore them, giving feedback from our life experience and our thoughts and processes, I guess, into them. And the topic of the day is really being recession proof and building multiple streams of income. So, we're going to go through taking some concepts from principles from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If you've read that book, who's that by again? I really should have it down.
I think his first name is Richard.
That
Robert. Robert.
Oh, I almost agreed. You said it so slick. I was like, maybe he's right. You know what? No, I will do this right. I might have started well, but I will find the name. Please excuse me, audience. I could cut this out, but I won't. I started looking at Richard. Rich Dad. You said Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and thought Rich wrote it. Oh my god. Okay, Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lecter wrote this book, and it's a very, very number one selling book on certain principles, and we're going to take these principles and utilize them while giving you some options on streams of income. So,
just as a first point, firstly, we're not financial advice. I want to put it out there as always. But secondly, I don't agree with everything in the book, but some of the principles presented in the book, I think they're bloody brilliant. And this is when financial education should really be part of the early parts of our life. But sorry, Mark, I'm going to let you continue.
I thought you were just going to say, I don't agree, and just shut up. And I was like, what? Just, I don't agree. You can go on, Mark. I'm like, okay, well. But yeah, I think, like you said, we're not financial advisors. We're just giving you things that we've done or are underway of doing. And hopefully it gives you some guidance, or, as always, share with us what you've been up to, and we can see how it takes us on this journey called life. So, talking about the principles from Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if you pretend you are sitting on a stool, like a weird one-legged stool, and I don't mean the type that has that nice flat surface base at the bottom that will spread out the fall, but I mean just one stick. You can tell it's supposed to have more. So if someone came around and just bashed that leg of the stool, you would most likely topple over and bump your butt on the floor, right? Yeah, you have no safety there, and I mean it's uncomfortable. So yeah, if you had one stool, you kind of just flat out the moment something takes it away. But let's be honest. Let's be very honest here. You're very unlikely to be sitting on a one-legged stool without any supports. You're most likely to have one with, say, three or four stools. Like, as a fact, you'll have that extra support. And even if you had one with three legs, if someone came and bashed off one of the legs in that instance, you could still most likely balance somewhat. So maybe your stool would shake a little bit, but you'd still have that security. Especially if you have four, of course, you're more likely to still be sitting, but be like, "Why did you just come and do that in the first place?" More than on the floor looking up, like, "Why did you just do this to my life?"
Oh, okay. Firstly, it sounds like an amazing activity that I'm gonna try out at our next get together. I'm gonna get you on a
Don't bring
stool.
me
I'm gonna
into
get a
this.
hammer and
Don't
start
bring.
bashing the legs underneath it.
It's,
But placing that on the side and placing that in my activity bucket. I love the description because it's a great metaphor for personal finances. The more legs you have to support your stool, which is practically a representation for your life, the more secure that you're going to be in the long term, and the more secure you're going to be against people coming around and bashing the legs.
mm.
And people bashing the legs are essentially a personification of life. That could be your job being cut, recession coming around. It could also be sickness and health, because if you were to be sick, God forbid, uh, it would mean that perhaps you wouldn't be able to do your day-to-day job anymore, and as a consequence of that, you could potentially lose that side of the income. And as I said, this is the same. This is a perfect replica of finances. The more income streams you have, the less likely you're going to be to fall and be knocked out.
This is so extremely important as the vast majority of people have only one stream of income, and that's just their job. Their like day-to-day salary, regardless of where or what that job pays. That tends to be the case where you have one leg, and even though that leg may take a while to fall, you're still toppling. That's the case, right? So you trade your time for your salary, and I remember we talked about this. How much time is actually worth. But what are some of the options available if you want to make your finances more secure? If we wanted to take ourselves and bolster ourselves and look and say, hey, if you kick my chair, I am not falling anywhere. Or in other words, if we want to make ourselves recession proof. And this is where we get into the topic of income and the streams you can use to make it in terms of passive and active income, making your money work for you versus working for your money in a sense.
And the proposal here today is that we're going to be looking at four possibilities and four ways in which you can make that money work for you, as well as you work for your money. And those four possibilities are active income, i.e., the normal salary, looking at real estate, looking at investing, and looking at side hustle. Just four ideas to spark your creativity, maybe start thinking about yourself, what you could do. We're going to be providing some of our experiences and keeping it light and fun, let's call it.
Light and fun. One one key question you may have, and you might have heard it all the time: passive income, active income, passive income, active income. But what is the main difference? And the Google definition, I'm not even going to go into Webster or anything, is basically active income is earned through effort or output. In contrast, passive income requires upfront work. So it's that initial work that then pays off over time for the passive income, whereas the active is that ongoing engagement, or where you then get an output from it. So the more you know.
So the perfect example of active income is your salary. So salary is primarily you selling your time for a service. And then in the majority of cases, this is you selling your time for the 40-hour a week job, which is advertised on one of those job portals, which end up being probably about 60 hours a week. And the way that we're going to be looking at all these activities by essentially looking at the time that is required to, let's say, set up this activity, the
Mhm.
time investment. We're going to be looking at from the returns and how quickly those returns come back to us. We're going to be looking at how much money is required in order to set up, and also what kind of returns we can expect. I think this is a really good way of just summarizing those four strands we're going to be looking at. So going back to the salary, salary is essentially something that we can think of as a low investment to set up. We will
Mhm.
go through an education, we will go through some sort of a formal way of training, And relatively speaking, it's a fairly low investment, and to some extent, sometimes it's not even required. You could quite easily go into apprenticeships that even pay you to do the learning to get to the same level as someone who has got a degree. And the time that is required to get those investments back and start getting some returns, I classify that as quite high, because realistically, if you want to amass tons of wealth, or you want to amass, let's say, the money required to buy your house, it will take a significant amount of time depending on how much you're being paid. So that could be anywhere from maybe even 5 to 10 years. So that's why I classify that as high. And the money investment which is required, on the other hand, it's quite low. So typically educations are quite cheap to get, especially somewhere around the UK, probably not the same in the US, but it is something that you can do relatively easily, and the returns that you get can be anywhere between low to medium, so depending on the job that you get back.
The
So a
keyword here
perfect
is
example
relative,
is
by the way. The keyword here is relative.
very relative. The key example I can think of here, this is probably the one type of income that the majority of us do, is like sell our time. But there is also other ways of doing this. So you could potentially look at ways of working as a contractor. Working as a contractor can get you more money, for instance, on a daily, hourly base. But of course, it comes with more risks. So that means that you could be laid off within a week, or you could, for instance, not have as much protection in case you want to go on holiday or in case you got a sick day. It could also look at you being a freelancer. So if you've got some special skills, perhaps you're a good designer, or perhaps you can make website, you could sell your time on the side, on top of your day job, performing those skills.
Mm.
And there is this almost balance of between how much risk do you want in your life versus how much return you want. And I guess it's like about finding that balance. For some people, being an employee works quite well. For some people, having a little bit more of extra risk and having high returns as well works better for them. And it's about finding that balance that works for you. But those are the, let's call it, the classic examples of having an active income, also known as a salary.
One thing that comes to mind, and I hope you remember this too, Val, is when you think about like how comfortable you are and determining the level you want to be, was when you differentiate from salary, being employed, to then there's always this huge jump to entrepreneur, but in the middle of that is business owner. And that's that level that people have that sliding scale. And you might feel like you want to be an entrepreneur, but you might just want to be a wealthy business owner. And that's that difference that you can make. And part of that would be, as an opportunity or an example, would be if you owned real estate, you can get yourself into that business owner category without having to go full risk level entrepreneur in this stage. And that's where you just own properties, say. So the time investment to set up, say, a property is kind of medium. And I'm not including the time taken to like raise the funds, but I mean in terms of doing all the paperwork, getting the lawyers, solicitors, stamp duty, everything covered in terms of purchasing the property. Depending on where you are, right here in the US, it can be very quick. Some people get that quick turnover, but when I'm coming to the UK, it's kind of medium in term, relatively medium time frame taken to go about saying I want a property and then purchase a property, unless you know it immediately, because you do tend to get outbid or whatnot. Then the investment taken to run it in terms of time can be low. Now that is, there's a number of factors you can choose to make this the case. And if you are a micromanager, no one will help you regardless of what you choose. You're going to take your time. But in actuality, you shouldn't have to take much time investment to run it. It should practically run itself if you're getting into properties. Even I say run itself. Yeah, it just takes some form of check-ins depending on how you're handling your properties. But when it comes to the money investment needed for the good returns here, that's when we just skyrocket. That's when we need to like put a huge upfront cost. You can pay it out right if you have to, but there is a larger cost to it to get on board in this one. So if you want to get into properties, there are help out there. There's mortgages and whatnot, but there's still a high upfront cost and ongoing cost in terms of high upfront costs, sorry, to get to that property stage. So if you've managed to get that grandparents' money, good on you. Those inheritance works out for some people, but yeah, otherwise it does take a high investment. Whereas when it gets to the returns, this can be, say, low to medium when it comes to rent, or say medium to high when you just get the property to appreciate. So when I say this can take us into the pros and cons. So if you want that low to medium, you can rent out your property, and that way you'll get a nice return. However, you now have to deal with tenants, you now have to deal with upkeep, maintenance, and or the upside is those tenants are probably paying off your mortgage and paying you some extra so you can go out shopping and do whatever you like with it. You've got this residual income coming. The downside is they could randomly be like, I don't want to be here anymore, find a new tenant, or the boiler is broken, that's expensive. Or they destroy a wall, you got all this deposit scheme. There's a lot of things that you have to work on there to like.
Or even worse, they stop paying and they start squatting in your property.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And you can your deposits will only cover so much. Uh, so, so it really just varies in terms of comfort there. But then um, if you want to get to that more medium to high property appreciation, now you could say before I move there that, oh, if you get multiple properties, you can have a lot of rent, but that is still lots of medium to low that just accumulate. Whereas if you just want that big bulky, that's where the property appreciates. And of course, this is dependent on which interest you went for, capital or capital plus interest. Sorry, interest or interest plus capital.
Sorry. What do you mean by the property appreciates?
So that means that the value of your property goes up. And that is really
Uh-huh.
where, yeah, so that's where if you've bought a property in recession times, values of properties are going down. So good luck, depending on where you're bought. But depending if you choose, and this is where you have to be really strategic in it. You have to choose the correct location. Is it in distance of certain areas or where there'll be more people? Even if you wanted to rent it, it's still a huge factor in terms of, oh, have I done this near a hospital where I know I'm going to get a lot of nurses and doctors coming in, or have I just done this in the middle of a field? And depending where you do it, the type of rent you go for slash the type of increase in price that you'll get varies. So if you're in somewhere where it's about to gentrify, kudos to you, and I'm sorry to the area. But if you're in somewhere where they're building a train line, or if they're building like a new shopping center, that's likely to appreciate, and your property value is likely to go up. But if
And
you're in,
what's amazing about this, sorry,
yeah,
Mark, is that you can then work with your bank to take out that equity and use that money to then fund another house or fund another activity, which is an amazing way of building wealth.
yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. That's where I was going to go to. Another bonus is the fact that, yeah, your house buys you houses. Basically, you can use the money to do whatever you want, but the house can then buy you houses. And if you're, like I said, depending on the interest rate you choose, or if you choose to pay just interest, then that all you're going to get is that difference in price, and the initial amount you paid, be it the entirety of the property or just a mortgage on the property, that is stays there, and then you just get whatever that appreciation is. Whereas if you paid with capital, you're then claiming back basically money. So then say you don't have a mortgage on the property, you've now just got a huge asset sitting there watching you, and it's appreciating if you've done it correctly. So there's like risks and rewards in all these streams. But in all cases, if you buy a house, another con to watch out about is you probably want to change it. And if you're going to change it, you're going to deal with contractors. And if you're going to deal with contractors, you then have to, you're going to have to determine your level of engagement, because they do, depending if you have a good relationship, charge you a lot of money and then do their best to mess it up.
Mark, it sounds like you're still dealing with PTSD.
I PTSD. That's post. It's just TSD. Okay, this is just straight TSD, where you have to just go and watch and say, "Why are you putting a door there? No architectural drawing showed a door there." They're like, "Yeah, but I thought it would look pretty." What does it mean? This is my property. It's a so yeah. You'd have to most likely manage or mitigate, let's say, the works of different contractors. If you've got a good relationship, or if you're able to build yourself, then your time jumps up, because I know a number of people buy properties, and even if they want to rent them out or just build them up, then you invest your own time doing lots of work on your own house. I'm looking at Val. To be fair, he lives there, so he gets to just enjoy himself. But this man will DIY till he dies if he could. That's the likelihood here. But yeah, that's
But
really it.
you're right in a way, because I'm the kind of person that at the moment I've got one property, and I'm the kind of person that will go in when there is a problem and try to do it myself first. And if I can't do it myself, then I call in a contractor. Luckily, until now, I didn't have to call a contractor.
Mm,
So far it's been just DIY. But as that number of property increases, that amount of time I've got available will reduce. So we'll have to start thinking about strategies that will allow me to free up my time, because ultimately I'm trying to gain freedom and time freedom as well as financial freedom, and not just be tied in into a different full-time job.
I think one thing to note here is that if we're trying to do this to be recession proof, I gave you a lot of options, but the option that you should be kind of leaning towards is the one where you don't put your hands on as much, because there are options where, for instance, um, if you say wanted to rent out your property, you could just give it to an estate agent and they'll look after everything. You pay a bit more premium, but you get peace of mind. You get to focus on your other things. They'll find the tenants. Things come in, and you just say, "I want this amount of money. Make sure I get that every month." And if you get more, that's good. But you have to shop around. That is at a loss, because the more you micromanage, the more you take in under yourself, you do sacrifice time for most likely higher profits. But again, is that passive? You can make it your full time, and the moment you get rid of your main to do this, you've just made your active job. You've turned it into your salary. So it's just to watch that and see where in that balance that you fall and which one you're most comfortable with in that sense.
Absolutely. Having talked about real estate, let's touch on to investing in the stock market a little bit. So you may have heard quite a lot about stock market investment as well as cryptocurrency investment. I cannot classify them as the same. One is riskier than the other, but in the great scheme of things, the time needed to invest to do those type of investments is relatively low. So the setup time is essentially you researching which stock and shares you want to invest into. So that is entirely down to how much of a detailed person you are, but relatively speaking, quite low.
Mm.
The time required to invest, I classify this as high. Now, the reason why I classify this as high is because it's not easy returns. You don't get a large amount of money coming back to you relatively quickly. As a matter of fact, you'll be spending quite a lot of time investing, leaving the stock on the stock market, allowing it to grow over time, and essentially just watching it, maybe selling it if it's not doing well, swapping it over. So that's why I classify it as high. Don't expect stocks to be, let's say, a get rich quick scheme. The money investment needed for good returns, I classify it as a medium to high in my experience. And the reason why I say that is because, again, the type of returns that you get if you do really well is 10 to 15% of your capital. So if you invest £1,000, by the end of the year, if you've done well, you can expect about 100 to 150 pounds. Now, if you break it down per month, as you can see, it's not very much. We're talking about like a tenner to maybe £15 if you get
I don't know.
lucky.
Yeah, I was like, is that a sales pitch? Yeah, maybe if I put 1,000, I'll get 150. But yeah.
But bearing in mind that you want to invest in different, let's call it like legs for the stool, as Mark mentioned earlier in the episode, this can be a very good way of doing so, because it's a different revenue stream that can supplement your income. And in terms of returns, the returns that really vary. They go all the way from low to high, depending on the amount of money that you put in the beginning, but also depending on the company that you invest in. There is a huge range in terms of what you get back, depending on the performance, depending on the time you left the stocks in there, and depending on all the other factors, the economy, etc. So a great example here is that pre-pandemic, probably I would call it 6 months before the pandemic started, I think, I started investing in the stock market, probably about £300 a month. And what I would do is I would think about one or two companies that maybe come up on the news, and I would start reading on them. I would start looking at the performance, the outlook. I would start looking at how they're planning to expand the market. And from there, I would essentially make decisions as to whether I would buy that particular stock company, or whether I would just not look into it and just look for a different company. And in that period of time where I was investing through a platform called eToro, by the way, we're not sponsored by them, so it's not that I'm trying to sell it. I had some really good winners. So, for example, Tesla. I think I've managed to double my investment in Tesla, which was great. And then I had some huge losers. There was I think there was an East African company attempting to become the Amazon of Africa, which I thought was a brilliant idea at the time, given the untapped market. But when I invested in that company, I just saw like a huge loss of 30 to 40%. So as you can see, the when you invest, there is not always winners in your cards. There will be losers, and it's about finding that balance that over the period of time, or over the period of the frame in which you want to invest, will give you a net income. So I was fairly lucky, I would say, that by the end of my experience investing, which was, I think, was about 18 months, I think I saw a return of about 5 to 10%, which was good from our perspective. But I also remember that there was times where I was down 20%, especially when COVID started. And then there
Mm-hmm.
was other times where I was up 10, 15%. And what's good, I guess, to understand from the beginning is that you can never time the market. So
Yeah.
there won't be an occasion where you'd be like, all right, I'm going to sell this company because I can foresee from a crystal ball that it's not going to make me any more profit and this is the highest it's ever going to be. It doesn't work that way. And the selling and the buying always happens at the wrong time, because whenever I sell, from my experience, the stocks will still go up and whenever I buy, they go down. So there's no timing, and that's something that is worthwhile bearing in mind when I guess, let's call it like betting in the investment market.
It's funny because you can still shadow someone with eToro, but it's more that from my head specifically, when I think of the phrase "make your money work for you," I always think of investing because that's where you actively feel like, yeah, money. I put in this money, work, accrue. Damn, you dropped. Get back to work. You know what I mean? And everything you do, where you like spend your money, it kind of is to work for you, even if you're doing real estate. But it's still that's the one where in my brain it's like the most actively making your money get to work, because if you put it in a property, you're like, now sit there and work over time. Or but you've managed to get rent income and it's still working for you. Everything's making your money work for you. But that's the only one where I'm like, yeah, I put it in this company and now look at my money making me money. That's how I like it. It's that mentality with it. But then if you were to look at the fourth stream of income here, and this is where you make your money work for you, but it's really making yourself work for your money to work. It doesn't matter. Side hustles. And this is where you get into things like providing courses. Say you become a creative, you do things in your spare time. It's all these hobbies and activities you do that make you money. So maybe for us, it might be podcasts. It could be whatever activity you do as a side hustle. Some people bake goods, others make certain foods, some provide certain services. Wait, that sounded wrong. They provide certain services. I'll double down. It's something that you do which isn't your main active income salary. It's a bonus activity that gets you funds in. And I'm not, so let's remove the ones we've already talked about. You're already investing, you already got your real estate, but now you're doing something, potentially say you're setting up courses or something. And this is where you can really take a passion or a hobby and make it fund you. And so where it comes down to the time taken to set up, it can be high. You probably spent 10,000 hours getting this skill. Maybe you're lucky enough to spend less, but you do have to put in the research, due diligence, lesson, learn, figure out the marketing, all of these things that will take a high time investment to set up. But when it comes to the running part, because this is now focused on the passive, what you're trying to set up, I'm thinking here, and we're not sponsored by anything, but if I'm thinking here like Shopify or Etsy or anything like that, or even if you put a course up,
Skillshare.
Skillshare, whatever you do, the the investment to run should be low, because you make, say, a body of work or a piece of art or whatever it is you're selling, you put that out there and then let it sell itself. So maybe you're doing t-shirts on demand where you've made a design, put that up and people purchase it. You don't have to actively draw out each one unless you've decided to become a craftsperson who has to do it very specifically. Fiverr is semi, yeah, because you do something and then it pays you. But it's really those ones where it's low investment to run. The money investment needed for that good return, for that decent amount of returns here, should be low. Now, this because the barrier to entry to these things aren't as high. Like it's so you can do this well, like I said, with YouTube, you can find ways where you don't need to put that initial amount in high amounts in marketing. There'll be levels to this, of course, and the higher you get up, is the more you can invest. So that's why people will use, say, bad cameras and work their way up to decent equipment and such. So the investment needed for good returns doesn't have to be that high. It's the quality of what you provide which needs to be high. And that's why the time investment to make sure you're delivering good quality is high. And then the returns here, now they may start low, but they should be medium to high. So it starts with, yeah, the more you invest in your time, the higher up you're getting at the offset. The higher up you get, the medium and high. And the reason they're medium high here is the reason I put that there is because most people who try this, no, not most, but a lot of people who try this have the goal of replacing their salary, right? So when you get it to the place, you're like, have I matched it? Have I reached it? Have I got to this point? And for some, you don't get to that high level where you stay medium and you're just getting that additional income. Maybe you're selling it, saying it's fine. And in others, you get higher and you're like, it's actually beating my salary, but I need to keep my job. And if the moment, like I said, the moment you let your job go, you've managed to just change your salary. And this is why you want a chair with more legs. Even if you're doing side hustles, the name, it's in the name, right? It's a side hustle. You do things that get you money, and the best part for would should be forgetting that you're having to do them because it's become more passive. You know what I mean? So you check it, and it's those ones where you check and you're like, oh, I just made X amount of money right now. And typically, when you're working on your main job, your salary job, you know because you sat down and maybe you've had a lazy day where you're like, oh, I'm getting paid to sleep in a pool or something, but you're still having to be on company time. This one, you can be out with friends, doing what you want, sleeping in bed, and because you've got that set up with that high investment in time at the first place, the passivity of it allows it so that you get the returns without having to still be there working on it at those times of the day. So yeah,
I think the best way I've ever understood the concept was thinking about Christmas songs and royalties. You've rather sing a Christmas song once, and then you cash in the royalties every single year when Christmas time comes around. And it's quite a similar concept for a side hustle. You set it up once, you build the skills to set it up, or maybe you've got the skills already and you just need to put them into practice. But the idea is that you set it up and then you cash in on the royalty. You try to invest as little time as possible for the highest returns.
exactly. I hope this does help with in returns to giving you ideas of ways to make streams of incomes. We've only talked about four legs, but some people don't even have legs anymore. They're like the what is it, a bed of knives? You just have as many as you want. And these are just the ones that we ourselves have managed to um, understand and engage in. Well, I say this, but this man did talk about making losses. But it's the ones that came to mind for now. We might do another episode on four different streams. But yeah, the whole premise here is to take it and say, look at yourself, reflect, and see, do you have enough legs in your stool? Can someone kick it out from below you? And it is a time of recession, and maybe even we're out of it by the time you listen to this. Either ways, it's still always a good practice to have them. Funny enough, I always think about the fact that there is a high pressure on this generation of just, hey, have you only got one stream of income? What are you doing? And that's I found that funny. And then recession happened, and I was like, ha, it's a good idea. So it's just something to always think on, and see if if it helps. If you've got other streams that you'd like us to discuss or something that you're doing yourself, please share it. You know where to find us. We're on where is it? Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at the.needle.movers. We've got our own website, theneedlemovers.xyz. And otherwise, go into wherever you listen to podcasts and give us some feedback. That lovely above 4 stars. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but just slightly higher than 4 stars. Leave some feedback, and yeah, we always read, and we would love to engage if you've managed to listen to our episodes and tell us some things that you've learned or would like to share with us. All feedback is welcome. But yeah, I've go
But
ahead.
as always, we've been your host for this episode, myself, Valerio Tomaso, and my co host, Mark Jasons. And until next time.
Adios.